So today is the day that everybody has been waiting for. Certainly the lunatic fringe in the Democratic House has been waiting with bated breath for Robert Mueller's redacted report. They still insist that an unredacted report be released. I'm joined by Scott Bennett and John Carman. Gentlemen, how are you this morning?
Good morning. Nice to see you guys.
Good to see both of you. Now, it's literally just minutes ago that the report was released. It's hot off the presses if PDF documents heat up at all or if they are pressed. But I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read this thing. I certainly haven't. It's like 400 pages, a very lengthy document here. But we certainly know that it was announced that there's no collusion, certainly not on the part of the president or anyone in his campaign. And we need to go through here and sort of figure out what the redactions are. Now, I know you guys are on the West Coast. Have you had a chance to see the William Barr press conference that took place just a little while ago?
Yeah, I watched.
I heard most of it too.
Well, give us some insights, fellas. You guys are both former political prisoners. Well, certainly Scott was locked up for writing the book Shell Game. And what are our thoughts about this?
Let me just first say, I think it's good that we haven't read this yet. At least I haven't read the PDF, because we can speculate. We can throw in our guess like gambling men and see what, after we do read it, what comes up true. And we can talk about that next week. But I think this is a good opportunity to think, okay, we haven't read it yet. What is most likely in there? What is most likely not? And all the other aspects scrambled together. So that can be part of today's discussion. What we speculate is in there and where they're going. And then next week, when we read it, really evaluate and match it up. With regards to Barr's press conference today that I watched, I thought it was very low key. It was very non-political. It was very Keebler elf with the glasses drawn down and sort of an accountant way of going through Justice Department procedure and process. And the summary is there was no collusion or coordination or collaboration between Donald Trump and anyone targeted by Mueller's investigation and analyzed. So that, of course, redeems the president and his political rhetoric for the last few years, but it also gives Barr the political flexibility to honor his promises that he allegedly just made and methodically investigate every tittle and tat of this. And he also stole the narrative out from the Democrats, so they can't scream like stuck pigs about fantasy directions or anything, because he's set the tone. He's set the general scope and framework of what a Justice Department Attorney General, who's supposed to be a master at law, how he has legally interpreted this report. So he's taken that right, which doesn't belong to Congress anyway. Yeah. He's taken it firmly out of their purview. So they really are now, way behind in the race.
Yeah, Barr definitely seems much more in control of the DOJ than Jeff Sessions ever was, and that's a good thing, because we do need a strong individual in the role there as Attorney General. But it doesn't seem like the Democrats are giving up on this idea of wanting to sift through the report. We've got Nadler demanding that it come out. Now, John, when you were in the Secret Service, I believe you left the White House by the time Herbert Walker Bush was president and William Barr was Attorney General for the first time. Have you had any interactions with William Barr in your career in the government?
Not to my knowledge. I did have interaction with a guy named John C. Keeney, who was the Attorney General in 1996, who was under Janet Reno. And I was downtown in the San Diego Federal Building in a meeting with the U.S. Attorney to a lady named Amalia Mesa, Democrat, FBI agent Greg Harman, Harmon, and we made a conference call to this guy, John C. Keeney. And this was after I had already gone through all of the protocols, as you call them, reporting corruption, going to Internal Affairs and the ridiculous Office of Special Counsel, MSPBs, EEOC, OIGs. In fact, I just sent an email to the president. I'm going to finish another email about this OIG BS because it's just a buffer.
The Office of the Inspector General, you don't think has the clout we need it to have? It's not.
No, of course not. Of course not. It's window dressing.
And what do we think about Nadler now repeating his calls for Mueller to testify? I mean, they just won't let up. They won't give in. They won't accept the findings. What do we know about the legality of what Nadler is proposing and the Democrats not giving up?
Yeah, let me finish one little spot on the response by this guy, John C. Keeney, because this is critical.
Okay.
The guy said, "We're sorry, Mr. Carman." This is referencing all the death threats. Death threats don't expire, like after 30 days or 6 weeks or whatever. He says, unless they're shooting bullets at you, there's nothing we could do. That's a quote. Okay. So I'm sitting here rolling my eyes like, really? And with my background, training, expertise, Secret Service, San Diego PD, U.S. Mint, and then U.S. Customs, silly me, I wanted to fight the war on drugs, but there's no requirement under the law that they have to shoot bullets. I've had people breaking into my car. I've had people crash into me. I got broken ribs. I've had death threats even while I was at work. But after I seized a bunch of heroin, that's when I had death threats on my illicit phone number.
John, let's try to stay on the Mueller topic for now. We'll come back to this.
Right. What I'm leading up to is that if you realize all the stuff I've already tried, this ridiculous stuff with Mueller, how many millions of dollars did we spend, Scott? 200 million,
I think
something
they said
like that.
25 on the Mueller investigation.
Right,
something.
Over 2 years, and then who's running the investigation? The Democrats, and the connection with Mueller to the Clintons.
Right.
See, that's what I was telling you is that in 1996, the Clintons were in charge. That's what happened to me. You see what I'm saying? That's the connection. Once you realize that, you go, wait a minute, who was president that week? Oh, it was Bill Clinton. We're supposed to be protected, and we're not.
Well, see, that is interesting because this now echoes what Scott has told us on previous episodes about his experience in trying to reveal the information in his book, Shell Game, where Scott sent this report around to multiple members of Congress revealing the connections of terrorist financing between UBS, Booz Allen Hamilton, so many other people. Scott, how do you feel about what John's telling us?
Yes, show us the book.
Well, I mean, I've got it right here, Jason. This is every letter that was sent out to members of Congress, members of the media. And I've just happened to open up a page where I've got all the guys listed. This is what I said to Michael Isikoff and Tom Hamburger. And Michael Isikoff and Tom Hamburger are implicated in the current investigation, and I think they're CIA assets.
They're implicated in the Mueller investigation.
Yes, correct. I'm sorry. They're involved in the Mueller investigation. But, this is a letter I sent July 17th, 2013, Jason, to Michael Isikoff, NBC News.
The reporter, right, of course.
Nebraska Avenue. And I sent you this, Jason, on PDF.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. Mr. Isikoff, thank you for your letter of July 10th. To answer your questions, I've released 2 military whistleblowing reports involving terrorist activities and intelligence. One was released on September 25th, 2012, and the other was a follow-up to that report, which was released May 27th, 2013, Memorial Day. I released these reports to the military and congressional parties below and would strongly suggest you contact them directly to, 1, obtain a copy, and 2, obtain information on their reaction to these reports. I think it will reveal some fascinating new directions and opportunities for you and lead you to a place no other journalist has yet discovered. The parties include U.S. Civil Affairs Psychological Operations Commander General Jeff Jacobs, General Martin Dempsey, General Ray Odierno, Lynn Halbrooks, Inspector General, Department of Defense, Mike Rogers, Senator Dianne Feinstein, Representative Howard Buck McKeon, Representative Duncan Hunter, John McCain, Carl Levin, Darrell Issa, Jason Chavez, Charles Grassley, Peter King, Lindsey Graham, Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, Eric Cantor, Henry Waxman, Michael McCall, Michelle Bachmann, Dana Rohrabacher, Marco Rubio, Orrin Hatch, Pat Roberts, Jeff Sessions, Angus King, Jim Rich, Saxby Shamlis, Ruppersberger, Dave Reichert, Kelly Ayotte, John Thune, James Inhofe, John Coburn, to mention a few others. Wow. And I won't go on and read the whole letter here, but I said to Isikoff, a possible script to consider using when you sift through the information is this, quote, call the senator and congressman and say, your office received a written report from Second Lieutenant Scott Bennett, a U.S. Army officer from the 11th Psychological Operations Battalion, who is also liaison officer for U.S. Special Operations Command to the State Department Coordinator for Counterterrorism, Ambassador Del Daly, who was the general of Joint Special Operations Command before that, and a terrorist threat finance analyst from U.S. Central Command. I didn't fix tires in the Army.
Right.
Bennett worked for the defense contractor Booz Allen Hamilton. Bennett's report addressed specific terrorist finance activity and intelligence agency failures. The report was dated September 25th, 2012. A follow-up report was sent out May 27, 2013. We would like a copy of this report that was sent to you, Congressman, Senator, and also would like to know what your reaction to this report has been. I've enclosed a letter and have written to my military attorney instructing him to release to you both of my reports. However, since the military has been trying to cover up this matter for the past year, my expectation is they will try and stonewall and dissuade you from digging deeper. I hope you will not succumb to their efforts and will instead demand nothing less than the whole truth. Should you wish to review my credentials, academic, professional, and security clearance, by all means, let me know and I will be happy to share them with you. Second Lieutenant Scott Bennett. So that went out to Michael Isikoff. And, I think he came up and interviewed me with Tom Hamburger.
Really?
And really the rest is history, Jason, but it's all here.
So you've said you believe that Isikoff is a CIA asset. He, of course, is with Yahoo News most recently, or at least when the dirty dossier came about, and he was pivotal in that. Yeah,
Isikoff wrote the Yahoo News Christopher Steele story that was mentioned in the Mueller report, and was one of the triggers to a lot of this. Tom Hamburger, who also came up and interviewed me with Isikoff, wrote the story about Donald Trump Jr. getting the WikiLeaks in advance, which proved to be untrue later on. So those two individuals, I think, are probably among those, I would hope, who are named in Nunes's indictment or referral to the Department of Justice to indict, the referral letters to the Department of Justice to investigate. And they should be.
Let's talk for a second about WikiLeaks, because everybody's been very interested in this arrest of Julian Assange. Tom Hamburger, the other reporter you're talking about, is an investigative reporter with the Washington Post, which everybody who watches Crowdsource the Truth suspects is connected to the CIA. Kevin Shipp has told us it's connected to the CIA. John, what do you think of the Washington Post?
Well, I wanted to interject real quick that half of those people that he just mentioned, like the Senator Feinstein and Dana Rohrabacher and Chuck Grassley and all these other guys, I've sent letters to those same people as well. My language is a little bit different because his language is much more eloquent, whereas I'm more of a direct, because of the law enforcement aspect, I'm going to say it straight out in a certain way. And they still cover it up. They lie, cheat, steal, don't do anything about it, and I'm getting the same responses. So
wow.
I support everything he said.
You guys are in the government, and here you are contacting our representatives and basically getting no result. That it really is frustrating, I think, for a lot of people to hear and realize. Not really clear what we can do, but with regard to WikiLeaks and some of this other stuff, we just heard earlier today, about an hour or two ago, William Barr had a press conference with Rosenstein. I don't remember who this other guy is on the left, but they were talking about WikiLeaks. They said that Mueller's report had, in fact, concluded that Russians who weren't working with the president or his members of his campaign had, in fact, given information to WikiLeaks. Now, what evidence do they have of that? It's going to be interesting to look in this report and see, but you're shaking your head, Scott. I kind of agree with you. It seems a little bit made up. What do we know about this?
Yeah, that was some of the inartful inaccuracies that I thought Barr had mentioned for political purposes, as if to assuage the Democrats screaming and tone it down from less than what it could be, which I think is weak and cowardly. There is no proof at all that Putin or his higher up political agents in the Russian government or the Russian legislature in any way participated or engaged in any of these activities. There are allegations that Russian individuals and companies, which may or may not be true. We know how the CIA works. We know how informants work. It's very easy to get Russians or Ukrainians to turn, to flip, to pretend, or get Americans to pretend that they're Russians. And we know the Vault 7 CIA computer capabilities allow for the signatures from other countries to be attached to cyber operations. So it's very easy to create a cyber warfare operation, penetration, or hacking instrument and assign a Russian code fingerprint to make it look like it was the Russians or the Chinese or anybody else. That came out in Vault 7, and that's a revelation of the CIA clandestine computer cyber operations. So it's we're on top of this, Jason, and we understand how all the piano keys play, where they're just going and pounding on certain keys and creating this cacophony of confusion. But we're saying, wait a minute, if we understand that the CIA has the cyber capability, then is it not reasonable to assume that that could be an explanatory device for why you have anything Russian in the first place? Let's look at that and say, is it reasonable to assume John Brennan, who was the CIA director, who I mentioned in Shell Game when he was National Security Advisor to Obama, is it not reasonable to assume that John Brennan has his own little cronies who are so pro-Clinton and Obama, he's going to tell his buddies and do anything he can, write this report, do it this way. We have to coordinate and begin to engineer this whole thing. The Russian, menace is our escape valve. That certainly seems reasonable, and Barr sort of played into that. But he did say the Russian government sponsored some of this stuff. There were some very inaccurate things that he said, premature, including his, quote, indictments of Russian individuals at large. Well, that's nonsense, too, because, Jason, one of the groups are suing or coming to court and defending themselves. But the other thing is this. When Donald Trump was in Finland, the Russians, Putin said himself, we have invited everybody and anybody to come over to Russia
and investigate
anything that they want. And investigate Browder while you're at it. Browder.
So now you're hitting on the key points here, Scott, because it seems that, we see it on the face, right? We've got Schiff and Nadler. They're out front kind of running point, saying we're not going to let this go away. You mentioned John Brennan, and certainly he represents a number of people who have a lot to lose if, in fact, a legitimate investigation by Donald Trump and his Department of Justice begins into actions at Benghazi, things related to the financing of the Clinton Foundation, the financing of terror operations, including what happened on 9/11. This is really what's going on here, isn't it? These guys are trying to cover up all this stuff, all the things that you tried to bring forward in your book, Shell Game, and even things that John was trying to bring to the attention of these various government agencies. Guys, how do we break this deadlock? How do the people of the United States, including veterans of the military and law enforcement like yourselves, how do we break through?
Look at the history, and I know Scott will jump in on this. The stuff with this Russian collusion BS, even the Clintons are involved with the Russians. Bill Clinton spent his summer in Moscow for months, and they covered that up. They sealed that record. Then there's Uranium One and all these other things. The Democrats want to get the Americans focused on old history, World War II history. We're the enemies. They're the enemies. The Cold War stuff like that. Are you kidding me? I was protecting Russian ambassadors in D.C. in 1974 under Ford and Carter. I just heard him brought up as a left-wing president yesterday on a
Jimmy
radio
Carter?
thing. Yes. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I go, really? Okay. But It's like I'm protecting these guys. I've been invited inside the military attaché. These guys work with us. In fact, FBI agents, when they're undercover, they don't keep regular names. They have code names. They're all in Russian. and I am watching Scott kind of shake his head on it. Of course they are. That's what they do. It's a big scam. The American public and the American population is being fooled and lied to continuously. And that's what they do. They want to keep it going because that is their whole purpose, so they could perpetuate war. And, George Soros' name keeps coming up. And unbelievably, I was protecting some of the very same people at the White House that I didn't know until later. Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Dick Cheney, and all these other guys. I'm going, oh, my God, I didn't know that. But that's my job. I'm supposed to protect whoever's there, the Hatch Act and all that stuff. But I know Scott will support half of that stuff already because of his military background. And my family comes from military, so I kind of dovetail very nicely with all these things. And I support Scott 100%. Everything that he says is correct.
Well, Scott, you're shaking your head as I'm looking at Bill Browder here, but as John brings up these names, what do we know about Bill Browder, his involvement with the Clintons? I mean, it's pretty unprecedented for the president of Russia to name an American business person by name, and nothing at all has happened with regard to an investigation. If you guys were investigating some international crime and the president of the country invited you and your agency to cooperate, wouldn't you jump at that opportunity?
Yes.
Faster than you can imagine. Absolutely.
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's what we have. That's why we have embassies, and the people that work at these embassies are qualified or supposed to be qualified. Everything from Secret Service to FBI to that other company out of Langley and a bunch of other people. It's all the same. They invite them right down the street. They go to the Kremlin. They go meet with Putin. Look, I know guys that are over there right now, besides Ed Snowden, who actually have status as a dual citizen. I'm not sure if Scott knows my buddy Steven Seagal. Mm-hmm. He's got a dual citizenship, and I've known about it for years. And I'm sitting here going, okay, where's he going with this? Because Steven doesn't have the same background Scott or I have at all.
Yeah,
but he's manipulated it through the martial arts to get into the staff. So if he's working as a Russian diplomat, which he can do, he could literally go to the United States and show his Russian passport.
Wow.
He has to be treated as such, too. Yeah. But anyway, go ahead, Scott.
How does Steven Seagal get so connected? I thought he was just making karate movies in the 90s.
Well, he has connections because he's tied it in, not to go off subject, but he's tied it in because of family, heritage. His mother or father were tied in, Russian Jewish thing. So that was his little niche. But even I've got a connection to Putin in the fact that I have a judo background. He has a judo background. So I could sit here and talk about Jigoro Kano, and we would know exactly what we're talking about, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's a martial arts connection mostly.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting. So what about Browder? Why aren't they acting on that? Is that the thread that starts to unravel the sweater they don't want unraveled?
Well, it's one of them, Jason. You're exactly right. And the Browder, this Star Wars saga is not over. We're maybe at part 2, and we've got another 2 parts to go. This Browder investigation is going to happen if there's any integrity in the United States government. Let's be very matter of fact. Browder has been alleged and reported by President Putin and the Russian intelligence and legal services of smuggling out $400 million from Russia and giving it to Hillary Clinton's campaign. That's Russian.
Was it the campaign or it was laundered through the foundation?
I don't know exactly the particulars. I'll have to revisit that. One of the sources in Britain is given me some of the dollar amounts, but I can clarify that for next time.
I've heard it was always going through the Clinton administration, the foundation all the time.
Launder it through the foundation.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense, and it adds up to the money laundering issues. And Shell Game is sort of the first report in 2009 how she was conspiring to do that with 19,000 bank accounts and the Swiss government and Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, and remember Eric Holder forced the Inspector General change of memorandum of understanding. He changed the reach and effectability of the Department of Justice Inspector General when they had the Fast and Furious situation. So he's been covering his tracks and creating buffer zones ever since he was Attorney General. But what they don't know is Eric Holder and his assistant, Lanny Brewer, both worked for the law firm Covington and Burling that represented Union Bank of Switzerland, HSBC, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all these Middle Eastern countries and various adventures. So Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer worked for the firm that they then gave a break to and gave their client banks a break to. And in fact, even worse than that, it gave Hillary Clinton, conspired with Hillary Clinton to throw the whistleblower Brad Birkenfeld in jail. And then Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer returned to Covington and Burling. So their names, and they joined the firm after they left government. So that should be investigated. It's all part of this mosaic that has to be taken apart one piece at a time.
This is a topic you and I have discussed quite a lot, Scott, and this is something I think the mainstream news doesn't ever get to, and this is what we really need to know about. How we hear about the revolving door in Washington, D.C., but to go from Attorney General to this powerful law firm covering for clients, covering up this money laundering and all this sort of stuff. Now, both of you guys are experts in money laundering. Scott, your research in terrorist financing, and of course, John's background in the Secret Service. Let's talk about money laundering for a second. It seems like there are a lot of new techniques coming online for laundering. There's a multi-billion-dollar worldwide market for laundering money gotten through these various criminal operations. Cryptocurrencies are coming online. We see a lot of people owning their own cryptocurrency exchanges. Is it untrue to say that there are more ways than ever to make money disappear, to launder money? What can we say about this, guys?
Well, some of my other background is U.S. Customs, and I seized a lot of money. So when you have seizure, asset forfeiture agency type stuff, I'm not sure if Scott's familiar. He may be, and you may be. The Secrecy Act, not the Secrecy Act, the Bank Secrecy Act, or the money issues with having a secret bank account in Switzerland. That went out years ago, so that technically our agency with Treasury Department could go over to Switzerland and dig up secret bank accounts. Problem is, those people are not just going to give it up to anybody. They're going to be resistant. So then they're going to shift it off to another one back in the Cayman Islands or some other location where we don't have extradition. We don't share certain treaties to share information. Therefore, it's just like the Clinton Foundation. Those people are covering that stuff up. They're sending it off to offshore accounts. They could dip into it with their little silver platinum cards, but they're always hiding the money. And the biggest part is when I worked at the U.S. Mint in San Francisco, and I think I've sent you pictures of that one picture in the vault where we had 1,065 pounds of raw gold, 1982, smelt or dated. Some of it was from the actual gold rush. But in 1982, before I went to Customs in 83, that stuff is gone now.
Where is it?
It was moved. That's what I'm telling you. When they did the audits, like at Fort Knox, they can't do an audit. There is no gold there. They took away the Treasury guys, the police, which is another job I held, Uzis and everything. And they took away the gold at the price of gold was what, $300 an ounce, I think, back in 82, 83. So if you wanted the double eagle single ounce gold coin, good luck. Nowadays it's what, $12.50, whatever. But the gold has been moved. Remember the movie, the Die Hard movie, where the bad guy was in New York, and then after the deal with the towers or the Federal Reserve, they went underground. They were stealing all this gold. That's what it's all about. They've since moved all that gold, and they haven't had an audit in years. In fact, during the Obama administration was a specific request for it. I never saw it get done. So where's the gold?
That's a great question. Where is the gold? We've heard about gold going missing from the World Trade Center after 9/11. We've heard that Gaddafi had untold sums of gold that were removed after the destruction of Libya. Isn't gold the most inconvenient thing to move around? But I guess it's universally valued. I mean, where is all this gold going, guys?
even gold in Baghdad when Saddam Hussein. It's all buried. It's all buried. That's the whole point. People
But
don't
don't they
look
need
above.
to use it at some point?
Well, once it's converted to a smaller amount.
Melt it down or something?
Well, no, they would convert it to coins. Coins are the most readily available. If you go to Mexico right now, you could buy a single 1.2 ounce, and the jewelers, 1947 smelt that is, or mint, and they'll melt it down just to make jewelry. They've got so much of it. They haven't changed it. It's the same, 1947. They've got tons of it. But in the United States, they control it. They switch it around. In fact, Trump was going to mention we're going to go back on the gold standard, and I'm just sitting here, shades of JFK.
Yeah.
I hope they don't get him. You know,
Scott,
it's
did
bad.
gold come into any of your research with terrorist financing? You're talking
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
yeah. Well, you know, the most disturbing thing I found at every corner was the CIA involvement. I saw the CIA when Snowden was a contractor before he joined Booz Allen Hamilton, targeting Brad Birkenfeld, the Swiss bank whistleblower. When Brad was in Switzerland, the CIA targeted him, got him into a jail cell, and then went in the next day and flashed their CIA badge. And I reported that to Oliver Stone, and he included it in the film Snowden, but he chose a Pakistani banker. But it was Brad Birkenfeld, and the CIA had come after him. That's when Brad came to the United States with his 19,000 bank accounts and briefcase full of personal documentation, and fell into a trap. That's when he was rejected by every government agency that should have been paying attention to this. The Treasury, IRS, SEC. Finally, the Senate gave him a subpoena, brought him in, testified. The doors were sealed, so everything was behind closed doors. Then they indicted him with the very things that he gave them. And
Wow.
he was thrown in jail, mad as a hornet. Then I meet him miraculously, and we go through all of this stuff for 6 months. Now, white hats and all the involvement getting this, you know, it came out to be a report that I think has been the lethal, stunning punch in the face to a lot of these deep state operatives and the Clinton operations, and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer. Eric Holder left 3 months after my report started circulating the Department of Defense. And I know for a fact it was at the DOD because the Inspector General, Lynn Halbrooks, confirmed to one of the guy's fathers who smuggled it out of the airport that she received it. So you couldn't make this up. And every letter is documented. Everything can be traced back to the origin of Brad Birkenfeld, Edward Snowden, myself. And Julian Assange comes in because he was providing the WikiLeaks cables about the State Department cables that Hillary Clinton was writing to negotiate the deal with the Swiss government, and sending Chinese Uyghurs from Guantanamo Bay up to Switzerland in exchange for these bank accounts and leniency and all sorts of nefarious stuff. So it's offensive that people in our own government were using the government as a wheel of fortune, a big racketeering operation. And if there's any integrity in government, they'll have this brought out. They'll have Brad Birkenfeld testify at a Senate hearing alongside myself or Edward Snowden or Julian Assange, even if it has to be by monitor. But it should be transparent, Jason, because we've made this transparent. Nothing can be hidden. If I discovered this in the military skiff, it would have been classified. But because I did not, it cannot be classified, and that's what they're terrified of. I wouldn't be doubtful that our names are not in a lot of the Mueller investigations. They may not include them in the report, but they also may not include James and Joanne Moriarty, who you know well, who told the Mueller people about Scott Bennett and all of this material.
Right.
So our harpoons are in Moby Dick. It's just a question of when is he going to be dragged in? When are these white whales of corruption going to be laid on the boat and sliced open, and all of these things revealed? The gold.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah, we'll need a bigger boat. But I did see gold being dug up by military generals in the Philippines, in Asia, that had been stolen from Japan. And they had been some guys that I knew from New York had been contracted to go get it. And the CIA grabbed these guys and threw them in jail.
They love throwing people in jail. So wait a minute now. Help us understand this, because, you know, Brad Birkenfeld, who's your personal friend, Scott, and who worked with you in writing the book Shell Game that people can get at shellgamewhistleblower.com. So Brad Birkenfeld, he blows the whistle on UBS, and he gets paid $104 million and thrown in jail. Why both of those things?
He got paid after we sent our report to U.S. Central Command, after our report got to General Michael Flynn. So it was not until they realized he had a military officer who did this for a living that was not backing down and that held his oath and was looking at this like a minefield and was trying to stop soldiers from marching through it. And it wasn't until they knew that had happened that they paid Birkenfeld $104 million on September 11th, 2012, the same day Benghazi occurred.
Benghazi, yes.
So they most likely used the Benghazi-Birkenfeld payoff as a simultaneous psyop to distract, so you couldn't see a lot of this stuff.
Wow.
But Jesselyn Radick, who represented Birkenfeld, also represented Snowden. So, I've mentioned all this in the book. I've sent letters to a lot of these people. Brad, I think, was terrified because he realized with Bennett, he's now really targeted for assassination. Before they were just picking him up. Yeah. Now they had a military guy, and he wasn't stopping. And Brad had said, "I'm going to get out, and we're going to go to the Senate and testify about this." Yeah. And when my stuff bounced up and started going to USACAPOC, Fort Bragg, U.S. Central Command, James Mattis, General Flynn, the intelligence committees, the armed services committees, when this really started bouncing around like a pinball, that's when they freaked out and paid him off, and he got out of the country, went to Malta.
Now, I know John is chomping at the bit. Yeah.
Comment. I just wanted to interject. Everything Scott's talking about is so true because of the way they treat the whistleblowers, but when you actually testify and tell these people the evidence, and then they turn right around and shut you up, it just speaks volumes. Yeah. And when they do the reports, this is critical because we're all talking about the report that Mueller just released.
Right.
That's two different reports. They do a report for the public. They do an internal report that's secret. They will not release that. There's names like Scott is talking about. There's so much other information that we're not going to get at all, probably, or for a long time, because that's what they're going to do. I could see Mueller sitting at the desk now. He's reading the 302s. Oh, okay, we'll put that in. But you know what? Take this name and scratch this off. Put that in the other one, redacted. Yeah, that's the word, redacted. I used to go to a website, and it was always DW redacted. And it took me a while to figure out that was DEA Watch redacted, right? So those guys are always into this stuff, but that's a separate deal. But it's the gold, you know. Everything that Scott says. I mean, I support everything Scott says because he's also at a different angle, and he's mentioning all these really cool guys. I love Mad Dog Mattis, but he never returned my calls. I mean, he was busy, but what happened to that guy? I wish we'd have kept him, right, Scott?
Well, they were all fired, interestingly enough, about 6 months, 3 to 6 months after revealing, all of this stuff. And because of the fabulous corruption that it reveals, and everybody's implicated in it. Everybody in the military is implicated if they didn't stand up and do something. And that's the thing that's sad. There are many in the military that don't have the balls to stand up. They are more interested in their careers, in their retirement, and they get a fat retirement. They're more interested in getting jobs at Booz Allen Hamilton and Boeing. I mean, half the guys that Brad was exposing were connected to Booz Allen Hamilton. The Haydens and the Clappers and Ian Brzezinski, the son of Zbigniew Brzezinski, was the Booz Allen Hamilton guy who set up AFRICOM. Wow. I mean, I know this. I was in there. I was in the halls. Booz Allen did the Arab Spring with Rand Corporation, and George Soros was on board that. His organization was part of the Rand group when we had Syrian and Middle Eastern radio people coming over and talking about media and what messages we're going to get out. I mean, all of it stems from 2008 onward. This isn't one presidential administration. Obama was too stupid to understand any of this stuff. He was a puppet, but he also did really bad things such as canceling the Smith-Month Act. When I was in PSYOP, Smith-Month was sacrosanct. You couldn't violate it. Smith-Month was the act that prohibited psychological warfare from being implemented on the American people. Obama canceled that. And that's when you had a lot more psyop and communications and potential shootings, false flag shootings, and some of that stuff really increased tenfold.
Well, see, that's
So that,
interesting, Scott, because you and I have spoken extensively about the New Zealand shooting, and again, it's not to say that these things aren't real or that people weren't in fact killed, but they're organizing these operations where there's multiple purposes. Definitely killing is one purpose, to disrupt, to pit one community against another, foment hatred between Muslims and white nationalists and Jewish people and Muslims and white people and black people, etc. But they also want to create these, really elaborate false elements of evidence so that they can implicate people like, you and I have both spoken. I know you speak quite a lot to Jim Fetzer. He's very aggressive at going after these false flags. They almost want to put these things out there as bait, like a honeypot for all of the voices that are rising up on the internet, these independent media voices, because I think they realize that we've got tools now. You mentioned Ian Brzezinski, and certainly Zbigniew Brzezinski is a name that maybe people don't think about very much right now, but I never even knew that Ian Brzezinski was a guy before right now. And Zbigniew spoke about the technocracy. We've now got the power to broadcast information that can counteract propaganda, counteract psychological operations. There's been a huge movement to shut down legitimate news seekers and truth seekers on the internet, including Crowdsource the Truth.
And Ian Brzezinski's sister, the daughter of Zbigniew Brzezinski, is Mia Zabriskie in that Morning
Mika.
Joe CNBC show.
Yeah.
So they're
Mika
all
Brzezinski.
they're all right out of The Hills Have Eyes and their incestuousness.
It really is troubling because they've got a tremendous lock. I mean, if her brother is doing some sort of operation and wants the news to go a certain way, we see how these hooks go. And it's not to say that there's a brother-sister operation there, but we're seeing some of the network that is implanted throughout the infrastructure of media, government, the justice system, etc. And I gotta say, I think Donald Trump's presidency is a milestone in that it's really the first time that the American public is seeing this incredible network of organizations mobilize in a coordinated fashion to counteract what is trying to happen. I do believe Donald Trump is trying to drain the swamp, but it is swampy.
Well, that's where Julian Assange comes in.
Let's
Julian
talk about
Assange.
Assange. Actually, this is what I wanted to point out to you guys. There was an article that just came out earlier this morning in the Daily Mail, which is a British newspaper that I believe Craig Murray warned me not to trust, but it's talking about how WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange agrees to remain at a maximum security Belmarsh jail ahead of his U.S. extradition hearing next month with regard to the leak of 750,000 classified military documents. Now, Scott, last week you and I were speaking specifically about the Julian Assange indictment, that it was for conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, very limited charge of only 5 years. One of the Crowdsource the Truth viewers has explained to me that they got around the statute of limitations by charging Assange with this under sealed indictment prior to 2015, and they've just unsealed the indictment. So that is a charge, but it is really conspicuous that it was just the one charge, and now we have this extradition hearing. There doesn't seem to be anything stopping the Department of Justice or whoever from bringing some additional charges. What do you think, John?
I have to interject or ask a question also of Scott, because I'm familiar with these indictment procedures and conspiracies and stuff like that, because that's what they do. In fact, they attacked me, but on something. But am I not mistaken, or was it the alleged co-conspirator Manning?
Yes, Chelsea Manning.
And was it Manning given a pardon?
Commuted sentence.
Yeah.
Okay, now think about that. If it was a pardon, they have no case. That's one. Now, commuted means they still had a case, but they just said, no, it's not worth 5 years or whatever time she served. I'm not sure. Was it 5 years?
I'm not sure.
I think it was 7.
7. So what they're doing is they're trying to get it under the rope just in time, as you described, so that they've got a latch on and say, okay, we got a sealed indictment the day before it expires, so they've got a legal connection. I've got some theories about this in a good way. The bad way is not good, but if you bring the guy over and you indict him and you extradite him over here in the United States, he's already served how many years?
Yeah.
At the Ecuadorian embassy under solitary confinement, basically.
Yeah.
That exceeds what they would have given him if he had gotten convicted with Manning.
That's right.
So if I was president, I said, you know what, time served, or vacate the sentence, or commuted, or pardon. You know, there's a whole slew of things. But once that's done, it's like they don't really have a case, but he's in protective custody here. If they get him here, then we've got control. Then the president could do things, right, Scott?
Well, you're right. I mean, this is really, I think we're entering the great Game of Thrones battle where the real deep state operatives and people who are disloyal to President Trump are going to be forced out into the open. Gina Haspel, who John Kiriakou, who I know is described as a torturous woman, and allegedly has been given bad information and intelligence to the president about the Skripal poisoning and dead ducks and all that stuff. She's bad all around, yet she's around the president. And the president is understandably ignorant of government and the process. He's never been in government. He's never been to the military. He doesn't know anything about the intel community and all this stuff. So he's the victim of his own ignorance and also the malice and the manipulation by people like Gina Haspel, Mike Pompeo. The president did tell Pompeo to meet with Binney and Bill Binney, the NSA guy who educated Pompeo on the fact that it most likely was not the Russians that downloaded this over the internet. It was most likely someone with an external drive that went in and downloaded it. That went to Pompeo from a guy who did this for a living that I trust Bill Binney over Pompeo and any of these other people that speculate and emotionally dramatize the feel-good idea of another Cold War with Russia, which I agree with you entirely. Nobody under the age of 60 wants another Cold War with Russia. That's why Trump was elected. That sensibility of normalizing relations is very, very palpable among the majority of the American population. And Trump has to realize that, or else he's being pushed in a direction that could lose him the 2020 election. Now, all this stuff that Trump should do now, he should immediately dispatch a special Department of Justice legal team to meet with Assange immediately, yesterday. And in that Praetorian Guard, sit down with Assange and his lawyers and say, look, what you did with Manning is a small thing. It would have reacted in this. But what we're more interested in is the corruption and the treason and the McCarthyite dimensions of the intelligence that you have that you've yet to release on our own government actors. Who amongst us are working with the Saudis or any other nefarious groups, or have been doing pay-to-play operations?
But
You've
Scott,
given us some of the Clinton emails.
It doesn't seem like they're really handling Julian Assange like someone who they expect or want to cooperate. And certainly Donald Trump's recent veto of this bill that would have withdrawn the United States from the clash in Yemen doesn't seem to indicate that Donald Trump was interested in finding out anything about the Saudis.
Well, the thing is, Julian Assange is the best intelligence asset the United States could have because he's got all of the raw intelligence that human resource assets, human intel assets have sent him, Manning and many others, and he has created the WikiLeaks database of this stuff. Now, there's understandably some of the stuff is a little bit dirty because it's helicopters shooting up Iraqis, but the more important things, Jason, are the emails that are in shell game that still are in the WikiLeaks sievers that talk about Hillary Clinton making a deal to steal 19,000 bank accounts, throw an American citizen whistleblower in jail who was trying to get this out for the good of the American citizens and the saving of the lives of American soldiers who were being killed by Saudi money that was buying bombs and bullets and all sorts of activities for wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, Syria, and elsewhere. That's where the big government corruption comes in. That's where Julian Assange fits in. He gave it to Brad. He didn't just fall off a tree. He gave it to Brad, and those WikiLeaks cables from the State Department are included in what she's hid on her server. It's what's included in the Judicial Watch Tom Fitton, Chris Farrell motions. I've spoken with Chris Farrell. I've spoken with Fitton. I've given them the material. How they handle it and do it is another legal dance move. But all of this stuff is coming out, and Trump has to politically recognize that the Democrats hate Julian Assange because of what he could potentially reveal about the death of Seth Rich, Hillary Clinton's involvement, the pedophilia with John Podesta, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, massive corruption against Bernie Sanders, which may have motivated Seth Rich, various deaths, and of course the shell game of terrorist financing with the Saudis in theaters like Libya, the Ukraine operation, and in Syria. All of these things are what Julian Assange can bring to the American public. That's why the American public like Julian Assange. I think.
Are we still holding out hope that
Assange,
that everything that's happening to Assange is being done as some sort of poker game bluff to bring him back into the good graces? I mean, Pompeo has expressed, I think, that he wants to execute Assange, and Donald Trump has backed away from his comments supporting WikiLeaks.
I think everybody despises Pompeo and John Bolton. These people are neocon, Zionist, absolute
Trump like
war
them?
in the Middle East, agenda-driven people. That it's got nothing to do with Jewishness. It's got everything to do with this original plan of 7 countries in 5 years and taking an American juggernaut throughout the Middle East and capsizing these regimes so that they can be economic soil samples to grow our ideas of Starbucks, Walmart, and democracy. That was the Francis Fukuyama model. I studied under Fukuyama. I knew all this back in 2001, 2002, 2003. And all of this was modeled and encouraged by John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and all these other people. That's what the American people don't want.
But
so I
isn't
think Trump having these people next
Scott,
to him
hasn't Trump been extremely positive on Pompeo? I don't know that we have any indication that Trump dislikes Pompeo.
It's to his own downfall, Jason. I think Trump makes some very stupid moves, foreign policy wise. This election is his to lose. Anybody who thinks he can't lose is really a fool, because Trump, by what you just said with regards to vetoing the bill that would have got America out of the Yemen war, that was a good thing, and he made a mistake by vetoing that, because now he's going to be defined by Tulsi Gabbard. In fact, he already has been, as the prostitute of Saudi Arabia. So Trump doing these actions, Venezuela is another good example. No American wants to be in Venezuela. No one cares about the human rights in Venezuela. No one cares about their government of communists in Venezuela. They care about Timbuktu. They care about Idaho. They care about Florida. They care about Maine. They care about Oklahoma. They care about their own people. They care about San Francisco and bags of feces and drug needles. That's what they want their money going to. That's what they want good political leadership going into and fixing these problems. Yeah. They don't want to be in Venezuela. They don't want to be all over the place in the world. They've been there for 19 years, and it has decimated our financial treasuries, destroyed our military. We've got how many kids coming back in body bags and missing legs and arms and faces, and I've seen it up close and personal. It's why it has offended me beyond words' ability to express this entire pay-to-play operation that Hillary Clinton and Eric Holder and Robert Wolf, chairman of the Americas of UBS, who happens to have Trump as a client, okay, I'm not giving a pass to anybody, and if Trump does not get on board and prosecute this shell game, then he will be prosecuted by it for aiding and abetting the most massive corruption in the history of the United States. And I say, let a civil war come, because perhaps that's the tree that needs to be watered with the blood of these traitors for America to really wake up and be free.
Well, let's hope that doesn't.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
I applaud that. That's
in the last couple
of
minutes here, guys. let me keep you on this Saudi Arabia thing, because John, you were in the White House right around the time that Nixon took us off the gold standard, and Kissinger, who you've protected in the White House, made this arrangement with Saudi Arabia, creating the petrodollar. That was right around your time there. This is a problem that still hangs like a specter over the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, or perhaps a leash around the neck of the United States. What do you want to say about that?
Also, the Shah of Iran. We can't leave out the Shah because the Shah had a very special relationship with Nixon, and I came on just after that because we had the Savak and the students in the United States protesting in the streets of Washington, and I saw a little action in that area too. But supposedly Nixon gave those guys an actual printer, a currency printer, print machine from the United States Treasury. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, what's left other than we're giving them the actual paper and the process to make
To
the
actually
paper?
print dollars.
Yes, that's it. So once they've got that, what gold? They don't need gold. Gold's nice. It looks good on you. You know, wear it on a neck, put it on a ring, and put it on your chain or whatever. But they've stepped aside of that and they're hiding it.
Why
But
did Nixon do that? Why would he do that?
He obviously made some sort of a deal. I mean, you can only speculate because that's what these guys do. And I like Scott's synopsis of Trump. That's exactly how I feel. The guy does not have a background like you or me or these other guys, but yet he's making these decisions based on who surrounds him. That's what they do at the White House. They compartmentalize so that if you don't get through in the first couple of weeks or the month or so, they're going to be surrounded by guys that are going to feed them what they want, like Zbigniew Brzezinski, Dick Cheney, and Kissinger, and so on and so forth, to get into that. But I want to focus back on your question, which was mostly the Saudis. What was the name of the guy that just got tortured and dissected?
Khashoggi.
Khashoggi, right? At a Saudi embassy in Turkey, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. How long ago was it that some guy just assassinated a Russian ambassador on stage and
Yes.
shot? And I'm sitting here going, okay, if I was Putin, what would I do? I'd say, well, you know what? Don't overreact, but do it behind closed doors or do it behind the curtain. Do whatever you got to do, but get that stuff cleaned out. Nobody's doing it, to my knowledge. They're not doing any of the Cold War stuff, but they should to prevent a war. That's what they need to do. This Khashoggi thing allegedly was going to the embassy to get papers for his alleged girlfriend, wife, which is typical standard procedure, and he never left. You know, that is so wrong. I mean, I've had the same thing happen to me where I was pulled into a situation and I disappeared for like 5 years, okay? Similar to what happened to Scott. We'll have to talk off camera about that, Scott. But it's all this other stuff that's going on. So who do we owe loyalties to? Bush had the bin Ladens during 9/11, and we're still protecting the oil source. I said, wait a minute, why do we need to depend on Saudi oil? I've protected the Saudi embassy, for Christ's sake. I've defended and protected all these embassies and all these people, including the Venezuelans. But yet we've got oil sources in Venezuela. But what happened to all the gold and the stuff that belonged to him under the previous administration? And yet Trump just had the First Lady, I believe, at the Oval Office like a couple of weeks ago. So it's obvious. And I heard something, I'm not sure if Scott heard through his intel sources or not. Wasn't there 5,000 troops, U.S. troops, waiting at the border somewhere, having cups of coffee, waiting to be told to move or something? I'm not sure.
Yeah, they were all worshiping the photo of John Bolton and his yellow pad with that troop number. Yeah. I mean, it's the greatest fiasco. It would sink Donald Trump. And Tucker Carlson said it too. And Tucker Carlson's got all of this material, but he's been very accurate by saying a war with Iran, for example, would be the undoing of Donald Trump. It would end his presidency. A war situation in Venezuela would end his presidency. In fact, I'd say any military ship or plane or major loss of life that was the cause of Trump's failure to honor his promise to withdraw the United States from these illegal, unconstitutional wars is going to end his presidency. And you see, I'll put my money on Tulsi Gabbard. I know people are going for Bettinger
To
or
win
whatever the
2020,
gay
you mean?
guy's name is, and
Oh
the
yeah.
all these.
To be
I
the
think
nominee, or what's that
they're
bet,
all done.
Scott? Tulsi Gabbard
Huh?
to be the Democratic nominee, you're
I
saying?
think she will be the. I think Tulsi Gabbard. I'll put my dollar down, Jason, and buy you $1 worth of coffee when I come to New York. Maybe a little more
Think
because
that
you've been a
much.
generous guy. I think Tulsi Gabbard is going to be the Democrat nominee for president when all is said and done. And she could even win if there's a major fiasco. I don't endorse her. I don't like her. I like Trump, and yeah, he fails in a lot of ways, but he's a better man than what they have. But I think Tulsi is going to be slipping because she's already saying the same things that I've said, and that is she's positioning herself as the peace candidate, as the official who wants to get us out of these regime wars, and that's what Trump said, but he's not honored these promises. He's being manipulated by
Yeah.
these people, and that will be his undoing. And the American people are very fickle, and if they feel they've been lied to or violated, they're going to say, I'm not showing up to vote for this guy. He pissed me off. I didn't get what I wanted, so
Yeah.
I'm just going to walk off the field. They'll do that, and Trump could dip below his buffer zone to win.
He's got a
No,
bit less than
I
2 years to show us some action on this hashtag locker up thing. Real quick, John, because we're almost out of time. I want to
yeah, I
remind
was.
everybody, we'll come back to you in just 1 second, Sean. I just want
Okay,
to let
good.
everybody know that they can get Scott's book at shellgamewhistleblower.com. He details all of the things that we've been talking about in terms of terrorist financing and his interactions with Brad Birkenfeld. And of course, people who want to support John can do that by going to his Patreon page at patreon.com/John_A_Carman. John, why don't you take us out with some final thoughts before we wrap it up here?
Well, I was going to ask a question of Scott because it's important for people to know. I believe there was a military plan years and years ago that we were to involve ourselves militarily in the Middle East from left to right or right to left. So it'd be like from Iran to the left, each country, and we're doing that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the gentleman's name or the military advisor,
Wesley Clark.
but it may have been. I don't remember, but there was a specific plan that we were going to go through each one of these countries and do stuff. And I go, wait a minute, we're not setting up. We were in Baghdad. We were in Iraq. Why didn't we set up Burger Kings and Shell gas stations and Americanize these people and take care of things the way it should have been done a certain way? But no, we just go in and take what we want and we disappear like, what was that movie, the Three Kings movie, the military guys?
Yeah.
That kind of an operation, that's where the gold is. That's where all the stuff's hidden. We take what we want, or they did, and then the American public is dumb to it. They think, well, wait a minute, what happened? So it's a constant cover-up somewhere.
Now, gentlemen, I did have on screen this entire time we've been talking the Robert Mueller report, the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. And what I was trying to do was search for Michael Isikoff, but in typical lawyerly fashion, the PDF document that's been posted at the Department of Justice is a scan of a typed page. So searching it is very difficult. What I've been doing this whole time we've been on air is creating an OCR version. So I do now have a searchable version of the document. Michael Isikoff's name shows up in several places. And what I'm going to do is I'll post this searchable PDF version to patreon.com and subscribestar.com, sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth. People can get onto patreon.com/crowdsource the truth or subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth, and they can see a lot of the exclusive subscriber-only shows, including shows I've done with John and shows I've done with Scott. We were investigating the New Zealand Christchurch shooting, and sponsors of the show will have access to this searchable document. So for people who are just downloading it now and want to get into it, if you don't have the ability to convert it to OCR yourself, that'll be a convenience for our sponsors. I want to thank my guests, Scott Bennett and John Carman. Guys, fantastic
Anytime.
insights. I'll speak to you both soon, and I'll see everybody tonight at 7 p.m. for the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp. Get on to subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth to watch that. Thanks for watching.